Hello guys, so welcome to my new video, and I've tested every single healer in Season 3 PTR when it comes to Mythic Plus content, and this is going to be my tier list based on how each healer felt. Very important to remember, this is not a meta tier list. In order to determine whether the healer is going to be meta or not, you need to know what the best 5-man comp is going to be in order to utilize raid buffs, utility, and all those things. This tier list is not this. I'm going to do something like that closer to the patch release, but right now we're looking at how each healer felt in terms of throughput, in terms of damage, in terms of healing, in terms of how the tier sets felt. And if you like this type of content, please like and subscribe. These videos take me ages to test, takes me ages to edit, and it really helps out the channel. And before I start with the tier list, keep in mind I want to talk about some of the testing parameters that I use. I will be or try to update this tier list as much as possible because there are healer changes every single week. I basically spent an ungodly amount of time testing one dungeon during PTR, and that is Operation Floodgate. Now, why do I do that? Because I want to see how each healer is going to feel under the same circumstances. Now, Operation Floodgate feels like a great dungeon to test because it has single target requirements, it has burst healing requirements, it has rot type of healing. So I get to stress test every single healer under most common circumstances that you can get in a lot of these dungeons. My initial testing was actually carried out with Dawnbreaker, but Dawnbreaker's ship part was actually broken for certain healers, and it just wasn't giving me the right idea of performance that each healer is capable of, so I did refer back to Operation Floodgate because it just has everything. I also tried to use as similar gear as possible for all the healers. That means using the same trinkets, that means using the same weapons or similar weapons, that means using Rashi wraps, using the Forset bonus, not using embellishments because I wasn't able to get embellishments on all the healers. But basically I tried my best to keep the testing as fair as possible to try and give me an idea which healer is doing well and things like that. So let's go and get started. So this is the tier list that I'm using, and I'm using things like amazing, good, okay, and more testing. And this is very relevant because certain healer builds might actually completely change. We have to see, because I've seen some crazy wild testing being done on certain healers. And we're going to start off with the first healer, and I don't think it's going to be a surprise for anyone, but I'm going to be placing Oracle Discipline Priest here. Now I'll talk about the hero builds that I tested and how they felt and things like that, but Oracle Discipline Priest coming into Season 3 still has the same strength. It's very evident that Blizzard is trying to keep the class fantasy of Oracle Discipline Priest having strong shields, because look at the tier set they introduced in Season 3. The tier set gives you more premonition of insights, which in turn allows you to create more frequent powerful shields through the use of pen and shielding, because you have talents like Wheel and Woe. And having strong shields more frequently as an Oracle Discipline Priest in scalable Mythic Plus content is going to create a lot of issues when it comes to balancing, because the safety net that you provide is, it's very hard to balance strong shield. When you're going to start doing really high keys and you feel like you're going to get one shot or you're in danger of getting one shots, having strong shields is going to be extremely powerful. Now, Blizzard did nerf Discipline Priest, and they did add, or how do I say, they increased the mana cost of some of your spells, and the mana costs or mana issues, I did feel them, but they were not a deal breaker, and I still feel like you can play around the mana issues that Oracle Discipline Priest might have. I did end up testing Void Weaver Discipline Priest, and the damage of Void Weaver is absolutely wild because the tier 7 empowers a lot of your abilities. And again, Void Weaver is the master of AoE healing, but I still don't think Void Weaver provides the safety net that Oracle does. So in my eyes, Oracle is, it has a lot of chance of being meta, and I don't want to talk about meta too much. But if you look at Season 2 and you look at Oracle Discipline Priest and the reasons why Oracle Discipline Priest is powerful, it's still continuing in Season 3. Now, I have to mention this. I don't think Oracle Discipline Priest is the highest HPS healer in the game right now. I felt like multiple other healers could provide more healing or felt better depending on the type of fight you're doing. Again, remember, I tested Operation Floodgate, which has single target requirements. He has burst AoE healing from Big Mama, he has rot type of damage from Swamp Face. It tackles everything. I can tell you right now that Oracle Discipline Priest did not excel at all of those situations. There were other healers that I tested that felt better. For example, Resto Druid Wildstalker is absolutely beast when it comes to something like Swamp Face rot type of healing. So Oracle Discipline Priest is not the most powerful or the most or best HPS healer out there, but it provides good shields, strong shields more frequently in Season 3. The mana issues, you can feel them, they're not a deal breaker, but if nothing really changes, if Blizzard is going to continue with the class fantasy of Oracle Discipline Priest having powerful shields, it's going to be very hard to balance in that 5-man content. Now let's talk about our second healer here, and it's going to be Restoration Druid, or more specifically Wild Stalker Resto Druid. Wild Stalker Resto Druid is an absolute pumper. Now their tier set got nerfed, and I don't even want to think about how powerful the tier set was before the nerfs, but I have to tell you that in terms of pure throughput, I would probably say that Wild Stalker Resto Druid is right up there. In terms of the healing that you do, if you set up properly, I feel like you have infinite healing. And why is that? Because you're absolutely swimming in symbiotic blooms. Look at my overall healing at the end of the Operation Floodgate in terms of how much symbiotic blooms healed, how much bursting growths healed, and that's not the end of it, because you have so much synergy with symbiotic blooms and talents like Vigorous Creepers. Vigorous Creepers healing bonus stacks. The more symbiotic bloom stacks you have on a person, the more healing you're doing. You also have synergy with things like Root Network. You also have to look at the tier set bonus in terms of casting Reghosts with clear casting causes symbiotic blooms to grow on up to 2 valid nearby allies. You have so many symbiotic blooms, your healing is being increased, and you're just an absolute HPS machine. Now, you do need to set up and things like that, and I messed around with a couple of other talents in terms of trying to optimize my bloom uptime and all that, but if you look at pure throughput, I would actually place Wild Stalker Resto Druid ahead of Oracle Discipline Priest, but Oracle Discipline Priest have different strengths. It has that, or has those shields. So it really just depends, but I think both of these healers felt really powerful. Wild Stalker Resto Druid tier set did get nerfed. So if you're looking for pure throughput out there, if you know how to set up, Resto Druid Wild Stalker is absolutely insane. Keep in mind, it is a healer that enjoys haste. There's a lot of buttons you're constantly pressing, you're constantly setting up and all those things. So it can be exhausting at times, but honestly, the reward is there. And now let's talk about Restoration Shaman, and I'm going to be placing it in that good section. Now check out the end of the video. I'll talk about the possible swapping of places that could happen and things like that. But why is Resto Shaman in that good? I tested out multiple hero builds, and how does it feel? First of all, I did test out Totemic Resto Shaman, and honestly, again, it revolves around Surging Totem. It revolves around people standing in Surging Totem to get the most use out of it, especially with that empowered downpour that you can drop after consuming your whirling element modes. Now the tier set has bugs. There are issues with it, especially with the fact when you consume your whirling element modes, you're supposed to get a 4-set buff that empowers some of your heals, and that sometimes gets instantly consumed because of how some of the modes work. I also tested out Resto Shaman or Totemic in Dawnbreaker, and the ship part was also buggy, so there were issues with Totemic Resto Shaman. But I feel like Totemic Resto Shaman is in somewhat similar boat compared to Season 2. It's best played in that stacked up melee comp because you're getting the most value out of your Surging Totem. You still provide a huge amount of passive healing because of Healing Stream Totem, because of talents like Reactivity. Certain totems are shooting out chain heals because of Lively Totems. You still have a similar niche that you had in Season 2. And I can definitely see a situation if that melee or physical comp is going to rise further in Season 3. I could see the same thing where Resto Shaman filling in that niche because, or Totemic Resto Shaman doing really well because of how well it deals in those stacked up situations. Now, the biggest surprise in my eyes is going to be Farseer. I tested out Farseer in a couple of dungeons, and honestly, I was really surprised about how it felt. Now, I do have to mention that because your tier set is not tied into Healing Rain, there is a possibility that Healing Rain is going to drop in priority. Now, I was messing around with Healing Rain, with Acid Rain to see how much damage it's doing and all those things, but there is a chance that Healing Rain is dropping priority for Farseer, which in my eyes actually improves the spec in terms of gameplay, and I think that's a big design flaw if not casting a certain core ability makes the spec feel better to play. It's an issue that Blizzard should really address, and I'm really begging here, Blizzard, please look at Healing Rain for Farseer, because if they add some additional changes to it, I think Farseer would be almost, I don't want to say perfect, but a lot more enjoyable. Now, I did test out Farseer Resto Shaman, and the tier set is tied into Ancestral Swiftness. When you press Ancestral Swiftness, you get this burst of healing or damage, depending on what you want to do. And I know a lot of people are talking about Farseer, Resto Shaman damage potential. You have to keep in mind, the way that you deal damage as Farseer, you want to press DPS buttons to feel that impact. And if you're doing a dungeon that requires a ton of healing, you might not have that much time to spend on DPS versus something like Totemic Resto Shaman, which a huge portion of their DPS is coming from Surging Totem. But enough talk about DPS. I was really pleasantly surprised with Farseer Resto Shaman. You have to remember that the tier set gives you mana value. It provides you with better mana consumption, and honestly, mana felt like no issue at all. The mana consumption of Farseer Resto Shaman was arguably one of the best. Right now, honestly, I think both hero builds are doing well and they fit certain niches. I still feel for majority of players out there, they still would gravitate towards that totemic Resto Shaman because of the simplicity, because of the passive healing that it provides. I'm telling you right now, do not sleep on Farseer Resto Shaman right now. I was running that Farseer chain heal build and I had no mana issues whatsoever. I'm going to be trying out different things in the future and letting you know how it feels. I talked about totemic and totemic being somewhat of a comfort pick for a lot of players out there because of how it provides its healing. So I think Shaman has two very decent hero builds right now. And now let's talk about our next healer in this list, and that is going to be Preservation of Evoker, or specifically Chrono Warden Preservation of Evoker, because I think that fits that Mythic Plus content really, really well. But the biggest thing that stood out for me when playing Chrono Warden Preservation of Evoker is their DPS. Keep in mind, Chrono Warden Foresight bonus was actually stealth buffed during my testing, so when pressing tip the scales you get temporal burst, and during your temporal burst windows, when pressing Chrono Flame, you're shooting out additional Chrono Flames. There's additional interaction with some of your other talents, and honestly, visually, it's actually insane. You're shooting out Chrono Flames, you can add additional damage, additional healing, depending on what you decide to do. And I'm not gonna lie, I still need to optimize my Preservation of Evoker, especially during Temporal Burst windows. I need to figure out what is the best way to heal if something happens. I need to optimize my life bind healing a little bit more, but overall, the damage output of Chrono Warden Preservation of Evoker is arguably the best out there. Like, it's not uncommon to see Chrono Warden Press Evokers doing 2 million overall damage in these keys. Again, you get scaled up to something like 710 item level, which is not the max item level that you can get in Season 3, but the damage is something that stood out for me the most. Now, in terms of healing, I need to test this a bit more. It's one of those healers where I could place it in more testing needed section because I need to optimize my healing a little bit more. I need to stress test Chrono Warden Press a little bit more because I'm not sure where to place it in terms of the pure healing output. Also, given the fact that you can spec into 2 charges of time dilation is actually very interesting when it comes to Preservation of Evoker Mythic Plus performance, trying to shore up some of your weaknesses. I wasn't a huge fan of some of the recent changes made in terms of nerfing your base toolkit and all those things, and you do have, again, I don't want to bark on about range limitations because if you're a good Preservation of Evoker or if you're someone who's very used to it, you can't play around it. But there are a couple of things that are very clear to me right now. Chrono Warden Preservation of Evoker is an absolute beast when it comes to DPS. 2 charges of time dilation feel relatively interesting to play around in Mythic Plus content. Some of the talent choices that you need to make because of the new changes to the spec tree, I'm still not 100% sold on. We'll have to test this healer a bit more. And now let's talk about our next healer in this list, and that is going to be Mistweaver Monk. And I'm going to be placing Mistweaver in that good section right now. Now, there has been changes made to Monk utility. Mystic Touch has been buffed to 8% while I'm recording this video. So Blizzard is trying to give you additional reasons to invite a monk. Now, majority of my Mistweaver Monk testing was done with Conduit of the Celestial hero build and the tier set. I was running that melee build in terms of Jadefire Stomp, in terms of Jadefire Teachings, and honestly, I had a great time. Now, Conduit of the Celestial tier set is going to make your gameplay feel a lot faster. You get a good uptime on additional haste, you get a lot more CDR on certain abilities, and it almost feels like, when coupled with the fact that you are a melee healer, you're pressing your buttons even more now, you're either going to really like this intensive gameplay or you might absolutely hate it. I think with this new tier set and this hero build, Mistweaver Monk might actually be one of the highest APM or action per minute healers out there, and I know there's going to be people out there who are going to really find this too exhausting. I'm telling you right now, I've tested this healer on multiple dungeons and my hand was actually cramping up because of how much clicking you're doing. Now, I think the numbers are good. I think you can have a good time, and I think there are going to be people who really enjoy this. Now, keep in mind, I did get to test a little bit of Master of Harmony, but not as much as I would like to. I do think that the Master of Harmony tier set is definitely on the lazier side in terms of design. It's basically you're playing your spec and then you have a chance of doing more damage and healing. You press on the focus T, then you have a guaranteed chance of doing more damage and healing. But I did really have a good time with Conduit of the Celestials. I also think Monk is doing really well in Raid as well, so it's going to be interesting to see where Monk is going to end up in Season 3, because I think it's one of those healers that you need to watch out. You need to keep an ear to the ground on this one. Again, we talked about Mystic Touch buffs. You also have to keep in mind Blizzard changed how Vivacious Vivification works now. It's proc from Rising Sun Kick, and there's also been buffs to Revival. So I'm definitely going to be testing Mistweaver a lot more because there are some interesting changes depending on which playstyle you prefer. And now let's move on to our next seal, and that's going to be Holy Priest. And this is, in terms of hero builds, one of the most divisive healers in World of Warcraft when it comes to Mythic Plus content, because if I were to rank Archon Holy Priest right now, I don't have enough rows in the bottom to showcase how poor Archon Holy Priest felt. That tier set just did not feel like it was suited for that Mythic Plus content. I did not have a good time. Holy Priest gets absolutely and utterly saved by Oracle, and Oracle actually felt pretty good. So I'm going to be placing Holy Priest in this good section for the time being. Now, when it comes to Oracle Holy Priest, I tested multiple different builds. I played with Prayer of Healing, I played without Prayer of Healing. You can read the tier set bonus. There is a lot of emphasis on Prayer of Mending. You can look at the 4-set bonus. You're getting Premonition of Insights, which can also be used to cast more Prayer of Mending. So Prayer of Mending ends up being a big portion of my overall healing at the end of the dungeon. And the best way I can describe this is that you have so much more additional spot healing available because Prayer of Mending feels like a heal. It has additional heal attached to it because of the 2-set bonus. And you're also getting a lot of Prayer Mendings because of the 4-set bonus, because of the interaction with Premonition of Insight. So you always have this, or how do I say, you have a lot of additional spot healing available depending on situation, depending on how you use it and all those things. And it's great because in Mythic Plus content, having consistent or more consistent healing is great. When you compare it to something like Archon Holy Priest, which I mentioned already, felt way worse than Oracle. Archon Holy Priest tier set is all tied into Halo. There's additional emphasis tied into using your Holy Word spells during Halo. And again, if you read it, you might be like, okay, that's pretty cool. Halo interaction, it's very much Archon-like. When it comes to Mythic Plus content, and when you're outside of Halo, when you're doing back-to-back trash back pulls, like in Operation Floodgate, where every trash back, or there's so much healing needed to be done, back-to-back, and all those things, and you're outside of your Halo, you feel like an absolute wet noodle. I feel like this tier set needs, or something needs to be done about Archon Holy Priest, because there's no way it's going to be usable in Mythic Plus in its current state. On the flip side, Oracle Holy Priest felt so much better, and the additional healing or spot healing and all those things that you get from Prayer Mending and usage, and again, continuous healing that you get, because you get so many more usages of Prayer Mending depending on how you use the Premonitions and all those things, or Premonition of Insights. It felt infinitely better. The last healer in this list is going to be Holy Paladin, and honestly this healer has caused me so many issues in terms of where to place it, because even though I probably spend the most time testing this in terms of Herald of the Sun, in terms of Lightsmith, I still feel like I need to place this in more testing section, because I have a feeling that you're going to have one of the most diverse or different builds when it comes to Mythic Plus, when it comes to Season 3, when compared to live servers. There are some crazy things happening and people experimenting with a completely different build, especially when it comes to Lightsmith. There are builds that are focusing on Flash of Light. I don't want to spend too much time talking about this, but I feel like some of those builds could add additional value because of how Blizzard changed Infusion of Light. So initially I was testing Herald of the Sun, Holy Paladin, and honestly I didn't really have that great of a time, and that might be a bit of a skill issue on my end, I'm not sure, but I can tell you right now that if I misused my cooldowns, it felt extremely punishing. But I did try out Lightsmith a little bit more, and I had very decent time with Lightsmith. I did run multiple different builds, and I was running something similar to what people were running on Season 2 live servers, and I thought it was okay. Now remember, there has been some significant changes made to Infusion of Light. Infusion of Light proc chance is very different now, and if you're playing Herald of the Sun, it felt relatively sparse. I didn't really get a whole lot of Infusion of Light, and maybe that's what Blizzard is trying to do. But when you're playing Lightsmith, because you have talents like laying down arms, your Infusion of Light uptime is a lot higher. And because of this, I've seen multiple Lightsmith Holy Paladins trying out multiple different builds, focusing on buffing your Flash of Light. People trying out Inflorescence of Sunwell, people trying out things like Moment of Compassion, people trying out Virtue, and they're, again, you're getting more Infusion of Light procs because of Lightsmith, because of talents like laying down arms, and then you're empowering your infusions with multiple different talents, and it creates a little bit of a different gameplay where you're consuming your Flash of Lights. Again, they're going to be instant Flash of Lights because the way Infusion of Light works, because of the changes that happen. I have not fully tested this build. I don't know if this is going to be the way to go. PTR is for testing. Again, I cannot stress this enough. I'm not sure what the best build is going to be, but I have a feeling Holy Paladin might be a contender for some of the most different builds emerging in Season 3. So for the summary of the video, honestly, a lot of healers actually feel very decent. There isn't a huge amount of separation. I'm actually going to talk about possible swapping of places right now, but generally speaking, if you enjoy a certain healer, you can make it work. It all depends on how high of a keys you're looking to push in Season 3. Oracle Discipline Priest still has the same niche. You still have powerful shield even more frequently in Season 3. I don't think Oracle Discipline Priest is the best healer in every given situation out there. I think it has its weaknesses, but that didn't stop Oracle Discipline Priest in Season 2 becoming meta. So I feel like if Blizzard is going to continue with that powerful shielding and scalable Mythic Plus content, it's going to be very hard to balance Oracle Discipline Priest. Pure HPS healers, Wildstalker Resto Druid is an absolute powerhouse even after the tier set nerfs. If you know how to play this healer, the healing is extremely strong. For example, doing raw type of fights like Swamp Face and Floodgate as a Wildstalker Resto Druid, you have so much healing. It feels like you can go back into kitty form and start doing DPS in order to optimize all aspects of this healer. For Resto Shaman in Season 3 or Totemic Resto Shaman, you still feel like you have a similar niche compared to something like Season 2. I still feel like Totemic Resto Shaman is best played in those stacked or melee groups where people are around your Surging Totem. Part of your tier set relies on people being stacked as well in order to make use of your downpour. I was really surprised by Farseer Resto Shaman. Do not sleep on Farseer right now because I had a great time. I just think Farseer Resto Shaman healing rain needs to be changed, and I'm really hoping Blizzard is going to do that very soon. Preservation of Evoker, more specifically Chrono Warden Preservation of Evoker, because I feel like that hero build fits in Mythic Plus content really well. The biggest thing that stood out for me was the damage, because you could arguably say Chrono Warden Preservation Evoker has the best healer damage. I talked about the fact that you can reach something like 2 million overall DPS, which is very significant. In terms of other aspects, having double charges of TD actually was really fun to play around. I need to stress test the healing of Chrono Warden a little bit more. In terms of Conduit of the Celestial, Mistweaver Monk, again, I got to test out Conduit of the Celestial a lot. I didn't get to test out Master of Harmony as much, but honestly, keep your ear to the ground in terms of Conduit of the Celestial Mistweaver. I feel like I could actually bring this healer up a little bit. I'm being very conservative in terms of its placement right now. First of all, Monk is absolutely blasting in raids, and in Mythic Plus, it is a very intensive gameplay when you think about Conduit of the Celestial, the uptime in terms of additional haste, the CDR for certain abilities and all those things. You also have to look at the most recent buffs to Monk utility. Mystic Touch has been buffed, so there is more of a reason to invite a Monk in your party. I think Mistweaver Monk is something to look out for right now, and it could easily climb. In terms of Holy Priest, Oracle is doing the heavy lifting for Holy Priest right now. Archon really did not feel great at all when it comes to that Mythic Plus content. If nothing changes, you're only going to be playing Oracle as a Holy Priest. Honestly, in terms of my ranking, it is at the lower end of good and possibly at the high end of okay, depending on who you ask. But I'm going to be a little bit generous here because depending on the key level you're doing, I think you can have a good time as Oracle Holy Priest. The tier set adds additional value to Prayer of Mending and all those things. But honestly, you could make an argument for a lower ranking for Holy Priest, because when you place it in this row and you compare it to some of the other healers in this row, it might not always fit. And Holy Paladin, one of the healers that I actually tested quite a bit, and I'm still placing it in that more testing section. I felt like Herald of the Sun felt extremely punishing if you messed up your cooldowns. I tried out Lightsmith and I thought he was actually pretty decent, and then I saw some of the more wild builds appearing in terms of building around Flash of Light and things like that, because you have to remember, Infusion of Light has significant changes in Season 3. They reduced the proc chance, but they kind of buffed some of the spells associated with it. So Blizzard wants you to be like, hey, if you get Infusion of Light, it actually feels like something. But there is a huge difference between the proc chance of Infusion of Light between Herald of the Sun and Lightsmith. We talked about this in the Holy Paladin section. So there's a couple of wild builds, especially when it comes with Lightsmith, in terms of building around Flash of Light, in terms of... I did not get to test this because, again, Operation Floodgate servers went down. I can't test Operation Floodgate anymore. But I'm going to be experimenting a lot more with Holy Paladin. I feel like this spec might see some of the biggest changes in terms of new builds emerging and all those things. But it's still relatively early days. I do think that Holy Paladin could use some further changes as well, if I'm being completely honest. But this is my initial tier list in terms of how each healer's felt. I was being very conservative in certain cases. I think you should keep an ear to the ground when it comes to Mistweaver Monk. Absolutely, this healer, just saying it, I'm being conservative. I think Holy Priest positioning here, bottom of this row, maybe the high of OK, is something a little bit more appropriate, but I'm going to be, again, a little bit generous. Again, Holy Paladin needs more changes or needs more testing, because there's some builds that are just crazy. People are using them and they're actually achieving good numbers in higher mythical keys, so it requires a bit more investigation. But if absolutely nothing changes, you still have a lot of similarities to Season 2. So that's something to consider in terms of healer balance and all those things. I'm waiting for more changes. If you enjoyed this type of content, please like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. And I'm going to be, like I said multiple times, updating this tier list in the future, because there's changes every single week.